motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A startling revelation that was announced earlier today. MVP is so excited to announce the signing of reigning WBA Bantamweight World Champion Shernikica Neeks Johnson, 17-2 with 7 knockouts, born in Taronga, New Zealand, and fighting out of the Gold Coast in Australia. Johnson is a 2-weight world champion, currently the WBA Bantamweight World Champion, and the former IBF Super Bantamweight World Champion. MVP and Lou Dembella Entertainment Inc. agreed to an arrangement which allowed Johnson to enter into a multi-year promotional agreement with MVP as part of Johnson subbing in to fight on Friday, June 11th, which will be Johnson's first bout in the United States. With a win, she would become the first ever undisputed Australian champion in the 4-belt era. Welcome to Most Valuable Promotions. Questions that need answers. What happened to Dena? Because they announced the fight with Dena and Sherita, it was made official. The story is that Dena Thorsland is off to have her second child, which begs even more questions. So, was she pregnant before this fight was announced? Was she pregnant going into the announcement? Or did she become pregnant afterwards? Because if she did, I think that's downright irresponsible. Short-sighted. You see, if she was pregnant before the fight was made official, then in that scenario, she should have told them. That way, they wouldn't have announced it. If she got pregnant afterwards, after they announced the fight, that's irresponsible too, because you know you got a fight coming up. And not just any fight, the biggest fight of your career on the biggest stage, to where if you win it, you can then pursue undisputed. Towards the end of the year, there would have been plenty of time, and you could have taken the next year off to go have your second child. After you become undisputed champion, there wouldn't be very much left for you to do, so you could take the following year off. The way they did it seems a little bit irresponsible to me. Dena's not an old woman. She doesn't need to be in a hurry to have another child. She's only 31. She still has plenty of time. An opportunity like the one she just had for a woman boxer, they don't come around often, and I can't help but feel that this was irresponsible, short-sighted, and now we don't really know what happens to Dena. Shernikica Johnson is now standing in, and Shernikica is a good fighter too, an accomplished champion in her own right, but does swapping out Dena for Shernikica improve Sherita's chances of victory? Is this fight more winnable than the Thorsland fight would have been? Because I was convinced Dena would beat Sherita. Dena has seen many fighters like Sherita before and beaten them all to a pulp. Is this a more manageable situation for Sherita? Not really. Because just like in the Thorsland fight, Sherita's going to be facing a fighter that's fresher and younger than she is, and she'll be facing a fighter who knows how to apply pressure. What Shernikica Johnson did to Nina Hughes, she can also do to Sherita Metcalf. Do you remember the Hughes fights? How did Shernikica win those fights? By coming forward and applying pressure, by being aggressive. That's the exact same strategy she'd have to use for Sherita. And remember that she actually stopped Nina Hughes in the second fight. She stopped her in the rematch. So all she has to do is apply that strategy to Sherita, who really doesn't like pressure. And we saw that in the Miyo-Yoshida rematch, that Shernikica Johnson can fight a better version of the fight that Miyo-Yoshida fought. She can put the squeeze on Sherita and show her age. Why does it say that with a win, she would become the first ever undisputed Australian champion in the 4-belt era? Are all the belts going to be on the line in this fight? It sounds like it. It sounds like that as a result of Dena Thorsland's maternity leave, the other titles are being made available to these two champions so that they can fight for them. You think these sanctioning bodies would allow that? The WBC and the WBO? I mean, probably. This is the only fight in the women's bantamweight division worth any money. So if push comes to shove, and they have to make those titles available to two other fighters at the weight that are being paid well, they might. With a win over Sherita Metcalf, 2-weight world champion Shernikica Johnson may yet crack the ring IQ pound-for-pound list. She was already a champion at 122, then became a champion at 118. A 2-weight world champion who will have beaten 2 reigning world champions and taken their belts from them. She took Nina Hughes' WBA And very soon, she could potentially take Sherita Metcalf's IBF. The only caveat is that this is somewhat short notice. Shernikica Johnson only has about 4 to 5 weeks to prepare.
And she's got to get the strategy down right. There's that, and there's also that the fight is in America. She's facing an American. So what if the judges are partial to Sherita Metcalf's Sugarfoot fighting?
She's an outboxer, Sherita, and while Shernikica has it within her ability to put pressure on her, like I said, she has to get the strategy down right, and she only has 4 to 5 weeks to do it. She's got to wear out the old-timer, wear out the old girl, show her age.
Get rough with her. Get physical.
Shernikica, what you did to Susie Ramadan, what you did to Nina Hughes, that's what you now have to do to Sherita!
Do it.
I like Shernikica Johnson to win tenuously. Perhaps not as much as I liked Dena Thorsland to win. I was more confident about that fight, but I'm still going with Shernikica.
Men's featherweight news. Frank Warren responds to Nick Ball versus Luis Nery speculation. You may have seen 24 to 48 hours ago a rumor that Nick Ball was set to defend his WBA title against the Mexican Southpaw.
Nick Ball will not be fighting Luis Nery in the next defense of his WBA featherweight title. Ball's promoter Frank Warren told Boxing News that that fight is not happening, despite online speculation suggesting the fight will take place in August. According to Franco Zorsini, the two men were to face one another as part of the August 16th undercard in Saudi Arabia, headlined by the 145-pound catchweight clash between Teofimo and Devin Haney. As reported by The Ring, that fight now looks like it will no longer take place. Last month, the Queensbury Promotions promoter revealed to Boxing News that a big fight would be announced for the Liverpudlian. All eyes are on Naoya Inoue's career too, with Warren calling for his man to get a shot at the monster. Warren said, "I like Nick in the fight against Inoue. Inoue, I'm a massive fan. Guys get caught in fights. It's when they get up and win. That's fighters who can take a punch, when you can get off the floor and come back. He's a quality fighter." Warren added that the preliminary discussions with Inoue's team had taken place. They're up for it. As I say, they gotta win their respective fights. Come through those, and I'm sure we'll get it done. Ball is riding the crest of a wave as one of British boxing's leading stars. The unbeaten 28-year-old put behind him the disappointment of his draw against Ray Vargas in March of last year to overcome Raymond Ford in his second world title attempt 3 months later. Dominant defenses against Ronnie Rios and TJ Doheny in Liverpool showcased the Scousers' best attributes, but fans will hope to see him in tougher challenges in the coming months. It is true. I mean, those two fights with Ronnie Rios and TJ, those were layups.
Carmel in motion.
The real appeal of both of those fights was bringing Nick Ball back to Liverpool, and now that they've done that, it's time to get a little bit more serious. So, if Nick Ball is not fighting in August, and he's not fighting Luis Nery, who is he fighting?
Because he's not fighting Inoue, not yet. Inoue has to face MJ, presumably in September. Nick doesn't come into it until after that. So what is Nick gonna do? Take the rest of the year off? Does he have any mandatories?
He does, but he's not under orders to fight them. Per boxing scribe Fernando Sabatini, I've been informed that the undefeated Mirko Coelho of Argentina will be contesting his WBA interim featherweight world title on August 1st in Benghazi, Libya, against Josue Aguero. Labia Majora will be the site of Mirko Coelho's next fight. And if he's in Libya boxing this Josue guy, he's not boxing Nick Ball. So at the moment, Nick Ball is free. He's not under orders to fight anybody.
Do you think maybe they could have put him in a unification match? With maybe Angelo Leo or Rafael Espinoza?
In theory they could, but they seem to have Inoue on the brain. And so long as they do, I don't think they're going to want to roll the dice. Not if they figure that all they got to do is sit on their hands and wait for Inoue to take care of MJ.
If they do fight between now and the end of the year, it ain't gonna be against nobody dangerous, I don't think.
It'll be another layup fight. What would be Nick Ball's third consecutive layup fight. That is, unless Turkey can offer him a giant purse.
Because I think it would take a lot of money to convince Nick Ball to roll the dice now. He's got Inoue on the brain. So does Frank Warren. You want them to fight somebody else, somebody risky, it's gonna cost you.
We'll see what happens with Nick. However, what is not happening is a proposed Luis Nery fight. It would have been a good scrap because they're both pressure guys. They're both action fighters. Sounds like they were going to pull all the stops for the undercard of Haney versus Lopez, but that was not to be. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Bob Arum on Teofimo Lopez bulking at Devin Haney.
This is nuts.
Bob Arum has witnessed some mystifying behavior in his nearly 60 years in boxing, but learning that Teofimo Lopez Jr. is walking away from record riches and an agreed-upon deal to fight Devin Haney ranks among the all-time strangest.
When someone is giving you tremendous amounts of money you've never seen before, why are you angry?
Lopez promoter Bob Arum told Boxing Scene upon hearing that the Brooklyn fighter is balking at making a 145-pound welterweight catchweight bout on August 16th in Saudi Arabia that officials described as done earlier in the week.
I can't figure it out. I can't think of a theory of what he's trying to do with this. The money. And this was a much more winnable fight than with Jaron Ennis.
Walking away from the Devin Haney fight, Teofimo doesn't just shortchange himself, he also shortchanges Top Rank because they get a cut of whatever he makes. So if he don't make no money, they don't either.
Not off him.
The match pitting the pair of two division champions who each won on Saudi Arabian boxing financier Turkey El Sheik's May 2nd Times Square card, Lopez over interim 140-pound champion Arnold Barboza, and Haney over former unified champion Jose Ramirez, was signed by Haney and believed to have been signed by Lopez by an official who spoke to Boxing Scene earlier this week. The bout was so far along that drug testing protocols and whereabouts information on Lopez were delivered to the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, which usually starts to work on its bouts that are mutually signed. A day after the Boxing Scene report, Devin Haney posted on X that Lopez had not signed and that he was withdrawing from the bout, a detail one of Lopez's managers confirmed to El Sheik's team on Thursday. Did you catch that bit about VADA? That speaks to what Angel Heredia said on his social media, that's what scared Teofimo Lopez away.
The VADA testing.
Before the unraveling, Lopez surprised those involved in the deal by referring to El Sheik as a dictator on social media, which he later apologized for before opting to pause the Haney deal for quote-unquote personal reasons.
Why are you attacking Turkey? It's just craziness. I can't counsel him because you can't counsel someone who's not listening. This is nuts.
The episode compounds El Sheik's struggle to finalize another major bout, the planned September 13th showdown between four-division champion Saul Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. As of Thursday, the bout lacks a venue, a streaming deal, and a U.S. licensed promoter, although Saturday's shift of the UFC Noche card to a non-pay-per-view event in San Antonio on the same date could bring UFC CEO Dana White back to preside over the boxing event that seems most likely bound for Vegas.
Turkey must be chagrined.
Arum said of Lopez's withdrawal, which follows the wealth of criticism aimed at El Sheik's Times Square card and Alvarez's flat showing one night later in Saudi, as both events drew criticism for their inactivity and deprived the fervent U.S. fan base of watching major bouts in person. Not landing Lopez for a reported 8-figure purse is a final straw of sorts.
Or maybe El Sheik realizes this is how you become a more sympathetic figure.
The problem with those shows was not Turkey El Sheik himself. All he can do is pay the fighters to fight, then put it together. But it's up to the fighters to entertain, and that's what gets lost in the criticism, that what was wrong with the Times Square show wasn't necessarily anything Turkey did, it was the fighters. They're the ones that laid an egg. They're the ones that blew it.
What do you want, that Turkey should stand in a corner with a scimitar, urging these guys to fight because they'll cut their heads off if they don't?
That's really not a bad idea when you think about it.
I'm working here!
The problem with U.S. fighters, like Teofimo Lopez, was never really the politics, you know.
Nope.
Because here you have a guy who's brought bipartisanship and boatloads of cash back to boxing, and even that is not enough to get them to play ball, accenting that the problem was never really the money, and the problem was never really the political boundary lines. Two fighters and two teams that want to make a fight are going to make a fight. And if a fight don't get made, it's because one of them doesn't want to. In this situation, that's Teofimo, who, according to his manager, is going through a mental health crisis, mental health problems, while at the same time trying to convince you that he was willing to fight Boots, he has a mental breakdown when it's time to fight Devin.
Make it make sense.
I already did. I already told you, he was only calling out Boots because he figured he wouldn't get him. He was never serious about fighting Boots. Making this apples to oranges. It's not a question of how could Teofimo be willing to fight Boots but not be willing to fight Devin, because he was never willing to fight Boots. It was all an act.
The American boxer is less of a gladiator and more of a spoiled brat, lacking morale, lacking grit.
I don't even think this is a big fight, by the way. But that's all the more reason it shouldn't be this hard to put it together. This fight is not on the scale of Fury versus Usyk or
Bivol versus Better Beef, Joshua versus Dubois. This fight here in America is not bigger than that fight was in the UK.
It literally isn't. The only thing big about this fight are the egos. Not the marquee value, not the drawing power of the fighters, or even the aesthetic of the fight. It's not even that big a deal to where making it should be easy. But nothing comes easy when you're working with Americans.
How many times have I said it? It was all fun in the sun, tits, and tan lines when Turkey was working with international fighters. But as soon as he tries to involve the Americans, all of these problems start. All of these hiccups, and you know why?
Why?
Because they're the hiccups. They're the problems.
How are you supposed to revitalize American boxing with fighters like this? How are you supposed to galvanize a crowd? How are you supposed to get them excited, interested in this sport when this is all you have to offer them? Gossip, he said, she said, cancellations,
Clout chasing, posturing.
boxing scene articles. This is the American boxing scene
Now!